Hey, what is up, mortals? What if Villains had an Academia Season 1 Part 1? Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. All men are not created equal. All for One muttered, lifting up his writhing target by the neck. In a vain attempt to escape, the victim tried to launch a barrage of nearby debris at his attacker. He merely tightened his grip, making the girl's aim veer off course and causing a new stream of tears to streak down her face. Do not worry, I won't kill you. I merely wish to take something that you have, something which I desire. My sincerest apologies. I am led to believe this part is unpleasant. Without further hesitation, All for One willed the quirk from his victim, imbuing it into himself. After the transfer was complete, the quirk stealer dropped her to the ground. Yes, not all men are created equal, the amalgamation mused. However, I am the one who balances the scales. The collector toyed with his newly acquired ability, reconstructing bits of his surroundings with the wave of his hand. Growing accustomed to his new puzzle piece, knelt down beside the near-unconscious civilian and smiled beneath his mask. And I have the nastiest habit of tipping them in my favor. The quirk stealer stood slowly, brushed off his suit, and warped back to the bar he instructed Shigaraki to meet him at. Sure enough, the incorrigible man was waiting patiently at the bar in full costume. He turned to face his superior upon arrival. It took you longer than I thought it would, Tamura teased, slowly easing himself out of the stool. Without needing to be told, the young villain placed his hand, minus his pinky, on his savior's shoulder, and the two warped to the abandoned, distant lot a few miles out from Musutafu. A handful of trucks sat in a semicircle around the area, each one packed to capacity with construction materials. All for One motioned for Shigaraki to do his part, prompting the defunct delinquent to gently touch every piece of old debris and patch of overgrowth, which withered and crumbled into minuscule piles of dust. It wasn't long before they were briskly swept away by the wind. Once he was done, Shigaraki stepped to All for One's side, which was the only sign Tamura needed to give his master. Hands raised and gliding around as though directing an orchestra, the conglomeration of quirks began the long process of construction. He had his student hook him up to some supportive medical machinery, then directed his loyal subordinate to walk through the portal and return to the old bar. While doing so, Shigaraki noted the other portals opening, each bringing with them one or two bodyguards for his master. The demented disintegrator grinned, noting the reflective dome forming around the lot, rendering the project next to invisible. Crossing through the portal, the degrading miscreant took slight pride in seeing his team stroll through the door on time. Before you say anything, there's a good reason for you to be here. We've got some things to go over, and until his project is done, the headmaster wants me to teach you all what he's taught me. Be here this time every day. Got it? We'll be learning important skills over the next several months. After all, we can't expect to beat the final boss without the tutorial. Noting the attentiveness of his own subordinates, the young villain's smile grew wider. Let's begin, shall we? Izuku Midoriya ran to see the commotion in the street excitedly, squirming his way to the forefront of the action. Kamui Woods, an up-and-coming hero, was duking it out with a seemingly low-ranking villain, and this would be a perfect chance to take notes. As one would expect, the fight was relatively one-sided. The hero was backing the villain into a corner while support arrived to prevent any civilian injuries. However, what seemingly nobody expected was a newcomer to the scene, arriving with a flying kick, a debuting heroine announcing herself as Mount Lady. She barely had time to utter her hero name, however, as time for everyone present seemed to slow. The villain reflexively caught the young crusader by the leg with a crude smile before whipping the unfortunate giantess right past him, using the gargantuan maiden's momentum against her and forcing her into the mass of civilians just outside of the action. The crowd began to panic, the reality of their dangerous and unfortunate circumstances finally burrowing into the forefront of their minds. The wooden wonder looked briefly between the outlaw and the possible flood of casualties and chose to aid with the latter, allowing the villain to escape unscathed. Midoriya's jaw dropped as the hulking form of Mount Lady barreled towards him, before she was caught in a massive web of dense branches sprouted by the other currently debuting hero. The crowd let out a collective exhale, relieved at the averted crisis, and a couple more mobile villains gave chase to the villain fleeing from the scene. Kamui caught his breath, and the towering blonde was scolded for her recklessness by higher-ranking heroes. Midoriya blinked before snapping back to reality, cursing himself for forgetting to take notes. The quirkless teen shook his head, jotting down a quick note of Mount Lady and her quirk before turning home, disappointed. The crowd was bustling about what had happened, and how the situation could have gone awry even further. Possibly the more disturbing end of the discussion for Midoriya was what he overheard Kamui say just before he was out of earshot. Villains seem to have gotten extraordinarily competent lately. I just hope I can keep maintaining everyone's safety. As Midoriya began to walk home, he contemplated why the villains could be getting so dangerous. Maybe they're just getting better, he pondered. Then again, a lot of villains have been grouping up lately, too. Maybe they're just learning from each other. The quirkless teen didn't have much time to ponder this question, however. As he passed beneath a bridge, the sewer grate at his feet erupted from its crevice, a villain composed entirely of a viscous green sludge slithering from the cesspools below. Well, 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 if it isn't the future successor. Let me make sure this goes the way it's supposed to, kid. This'll only hurt until you go unconscious, and who knows how long that'll take. The sinister slop laughed loudly, striking fear into Midoriya's heart. He tried to run, but was no match for the villain. He moved far faster than the nervous boy expected. And to the sheer horror of his hostage, the sludge villain began stuffing himself down the young man's body. The struggle didn't last longer than a few seconds before Midoriya lost consciousness. As he blinked out of the world, he saw a flash of red and blue, and hoped it was something which would save his life. My part here is do the foul foe began before being promptly interrupted and captured by an angrier than usual All Might. The vicious villain was contained within a pair of soda bottles after a couple short seconds. But All Might was more concerned with the civilian laying on the ground. He tried waking the boy up, but to no avail. Heaving a sigh, All Might picked up the young man and jumped towards the hospital, praying for the lad under his breath and cursing his own weakness. Clutching his wound, he grinded his teeth and kept leaping towards the nearest emergency room. He should make a full recovery after a week or so. His family was contacted and will make it here as soon as possible. I'm sure it would mean a lot if you could stay here. You did save him, after all. Of course. All Might nodded, waiting for the nurse to leave before rapidly wrapping the privacy curtains round himself and the kid, reverting back to his emaciated, small form. Kid, I'm so sorry, kid. I'll make sure you recover, all right. Cursing himself, the #1 hero messed up his hair in frustration. Where had he gone wrong? Maybe if he hadn't let that one hardcore fan hold him up. He seemed so hurt and in need of inspiration that the symbol of peace didn't bat an eye at giving him a nice smile and handshake. Those seconds had to count, though. Shaking his head, the wounded hero kneeled by the bed. Either way, this was his fault and he'd need to ensure his wrong would be righted. The television in front of the boy's bed was turned to the news. Coverage of the Mount Lady and Kamui Woods incident report wrapping up. Still determining what's causing these villains to be so dangerous. In related news, the pro heroes known as the Wild Pussycats have recently been put onto the bench. 2 of their members are in critical condition, namely Maladay and Ragdoll. The remaining duo claims they have no recollection of what had happened to their comrades, and have deemed it too dangerous for them to take on jobs at half power. They're currently seeing to their partners' injuries alongside hospital staff. All Might's eyes widened as the newscaster continued. That's not all. Sir Night-Eye was also discovered unconscious and in critical condition in his own office earlier today. He's been reported to have faded into and out of consciousness several times, and he has yet to be stabilized enough to interview about what happened. The symbol of peace gripped the footboard tightly, flexing his arms slightly and bending the metal bar. He made a note to go see Night-Eye as soon as his current situation was dealt with. It was high time to make amends, anyways. He looked up after a while, expression steeled. Still, the newscaster continued. Finally, one Katsuma Shimano, a 6-year-old boy, was found in critical condition on the outskirts of Musutafu. The young boy originates from Nabu Island, and it is unknown how long he laid outside unconscious or why he could possibly be off of his home island. According to doctors' reports, the boy's currently running a fever of approximately 41 degrees Celsius and has countless injuries on his body. He has not been brought into consciousness since he was found. Authorities have tried contacting his family with no response. Villains are believed to be the cow. The television was cut off abruptly with the click of a remote. All Might stood after a little while, rubbing his eyes and taking a few deep breaths to calm himself before swapping out his hero costume for normal clothes and making his way out to the drinking fountain. Little did he realize that he didn't leave Midoriya alone. A sinister figure slinked out of the shadows directly next to Midoriya's bed, grinning broadly beneath his mask. He laid a single hand on the boy's head. Then, the screaming started. The nurses came into the room, sedating the green-haired teen, and All Might came close behind after swapping back into his costume and buffing up, only to feel fury build in his chest at seeing the suffering youngster. What did the boy go through? Why did it happen as soon as he left the room? His mind swirling with questions, the symbol of peace inspected the boy. The inspection was to no avail, however, as he found nothing wrong with the boy. The nurses, however, immediately noticed something after reading through Izuku's medical records. Hey, isn't that a sign of a quirk? The nurse asked another, who nodded. The questioning aide looked confused as she looked intensely at the green-haired patient's hand, which was very faintly pulsing with a malachite green glow. What's so odd about that? All Might questioned, well and truly confused. The vocal nurse looked up at him, just as confused. He's registered in our system as quirkless, sir. The sun seemed to recoil behind the clouds, befitting for the grand opening of perhaps the greatest long-term plan the collector had orchestrated. The quirk stealer silently admired the gorgeous construction of his magnum opus. The spiral at the far back of the building was as imposing as the crime lord had hoped, and the brickwork was flawless as its creator. With a final sigh, All for One stood proudly in front of the gorgeous college and turned to face the crowd of hundreds of wannabes and established criminals. Individuals from all walks of life could be seen here. Neglected rich teens, scrappy middle-aged men and women living on the streets, young adults barely scraping by on what little they can earn on small robberies. They all stood in organized lines, ready to learn from the best of the best. Giving the crowd a deep bow, the quirk connoisseur smiled broadly beneath his imposing costume. He took in the sight of all those who had yet to experience his criminal empire, and he was more than happy to rebuild it all at once, to teach a new generation how to perpetuate what he had begun. He gave himself one last thought before ushering in his new students. This is my villain academia. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 2 of What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. Midoriya took a shaky breath as he sat up tentatively in his bed, shaking his head to clear the fog encapsulating it. Izuku turned to look at the person standing in the room with him. The figure was tall and muscular, initially driving the green-haired teen to believe it was All Might, but soon realized that the figure was in a suit. He felt his whole body tense up, his breath caught in his throat. He felt tears bubble up in his eyes, and his stomach contorted itself in ways he couldn't put into words. Before the quirkless boy stood perhaps the most intimidating figure imaginable. Beyond the suit, the individual wore a massive mask with breathing tubes sprouting from it in several locations, with no visible visor or eye slots. The horrific man's hands were relatively pale but strong, and he stood with them palms side up before the nervous boy. Perhaps more chilling than his appearance was his voice. I am afraid this will be excruciatingly painful for you, young Midoriya. Before the green-haired youth could make a move or sound, All for One was upon him, hand clasped tightly around his throat, lifted off his bed. Midoriya coughed and hacked as he writhed within the conglomeration's grip. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his body, in what he felt could be his very soul. Izuku's screams were cut short by his crushed windpipe, and the pain of having something forced into his very being was felt yet again. His eyes flashed with light, and as quickly as the pain began, the high schooler's mind told him the infusions were being torn away at a rapid pace, screams turning primal and body spasming. All that the boy could do was think about what was happening. He felt various transformations take place, countless strengths and weaknesses enveloping his very being every second. The sheer pain and volume of changes was constantly overloading Izuku's brain. His body lost control of its functionality, and he felt himself begin to slip into unconsciousness again. Before he could, though, his body managed to spasm his back enough to let him get one scream out. At this, the nightmarish individual dropped the boy on his bed, before warping away in a vertical pool of gray sludge. Relieved that the torture was over, the schoolboy's mind allowed him to slip into unconsciousness, his essence holding tight onto the two new parts of himself as though his life depended on it. Seconds after losing consciousness, the number one hero bolted back into the room to see the boy he saved passed out in an awkward position, sheets ruffled and hands glowing. He knew exactly what had happened once the nurses confirmed that the boy had no quirks before, and the rage he felt next could be considered by all present to be far more terrifying than the presence of All for One. Mere hours later, the once quirkless teen bolted up into a sitting position, coughing and spitting. His mother came scrambling into the room, fawning over the young victim. "Oh, Izuku, you're awake. You're finally awake. Oh dear, are you okay? Do you need tissues, cough drops, food? I've got it all right." Her son held up a hand, finishing his coughing fit and taking a few deep breaths to steady himself. When the youth turned to face his mother, they both looked at his hand, which was now glowing with a malachite green tint. The light sporadically darkened and brightened itself, and both individuals screamed. This attracted the attention of some nurses, but they were stopped by someone Midoriya did not expect to see. The stars on his costume almost seemed to cast a dim light themselves, and his bangs stuck straight up like a second pair of ears. With one arm at the hero's side and the other holding back the nurses, All Might walked into the room and eventually silenced the family within. His smile, much to Izuku's horror, was replaced with an angry frown. "Please forgive me. I wasn't here to help you with the villain who tortured you." The worldwide idol took a knee to the anxious teen, who was even more panicked than before. "Who was in my room when you were gone? Why are you still here? Why is my hand glowing? I'm afraid we must discuss this in private. This has gotten quite serious, and we must be certain that you get the help that you need." All Might made direct eye contact with Mama Midoriya, who looked away, ready to cry again. "Is it true that your son was born quirkless?" All Might inquired. He didn't break eye contact. The teary-eyed mother took a shaky breath before replying tentatively. "Why, yes. He was devastated when we took him to the doctor's office and they said he'd never have a quirk." She blew her nose and tossed the tissue into a nearby trash can, which was practically overflowing with used Kleenex. At this, All Might's already agitated demeanor became darker still, gesturing for the nurses to let them be. He waited until the doors were locked before continuing. "Ma'am, I'm afraid your son has been targeted by a villain I have a long history with. It seems this villain used his quirk to transfer stolen quirks into your son." The number one hero paused to let his words sink in, and waited until they asked the question they knew he would. The first to speak, however, was the bedridden boy. "How is that possible? I thought quirks were a genetic trait. Are you saying that I have a quirk now?" he squeaked, scratching his head as he began mumbling to himself about the plausibility of it all. All Might cleared his throat to stop him. "I'm afraid I truly cannot share any more information at the moment, and you must not tell a soul about this. The nurses will explain your quirks to you, so that you may understand them better. If you could just rest here a little bit." He suddenly stopped himself as the young boy shakily got out of bed, walking towards the door, his face uncharacteristically fierce. All Might tried to stop him, but Midoriya looked him in his eyes with a sort of determination that made All Might take a step back. The boy took a shaky breath before mustering the best smile he could. "I remember the pain of what happened, but I won't tell anyone about it. I have a quirk now, All Might, and I want to use it the best I can. I'll be able to use it to get into UA, but I need time to study it, to practice with it." The young victim briefly looked back to his mom, smile widening and both tearing up before continuing. "Even without this new power, I'm determined to be a hero. This may be hard to believe, but for me, this is a miracle." Then, the green-haired teen made eye contact with the symbol of peace, who was truly impressed. "Thank you for saving me, All Might, and I'll be a hero who saves people," with a smile on his face, "just like you." At this, well and honestly taken aback, All Might grinned broadly and proudly back. Just like that, Midoriya walked out of the room and began talking to the nearest nurse he saw in his room, leaning against the wall for support. Just before he could leave, the number one hero was stopped by a hand grabbing onto his pant leg. It was the mother of the young man. Please don't let him. He's just a boy, and he's already been in so much pain. I don't have the heart to tell him no." Sobbing between words, Mama Midoriya pleaded further with All Might, before he held up a hand with a warm and caring look. "Do not worry. One of the main reasons I'm in this city right now is because I've been called in to work at UA myself. I will make sure your son is safe." The symbol of peace sighed, signs of guilt tainting his brave demeanor. "After all, this is perhaps my fault. This villain that attacked him. As I stated, that individual and I have a long-standing dispute. It's only right that I protect this boy at all costs." Sniffling, the heartbroken mother nodded, sobbing uncontrollably. All Might gently pat her back to calm her, looking out at the young boy. He was still chatting with the nurses, writing out information on his arm with a pen. All Might sighed nervously. "He really does seem happy, Mrs. Midoriya. I wouldn't worry about him too much. I think he's better off now than you think." As the months passed, Izuku Midoriya researched his quirks tirelessly. It turned out that this stranger had given him not one, but two quirks, and they seemed to counter one another. The first gave him the ability to launch pulses of energy from his hands, feet, and chest. However, to make the pulses denser, larger, or simply go further, he had to use more stamina. In addition, he could only launch the pulses in tandem with his heartbeat. This was what caused his hands to glow. At the apex of his heartbeat, he could launch the pulses. However, his other quirk made his heartbeat sporadic and uncontrolled without affecting his other bodily functions. The stranger truly did seem to give him an impractical pairing of abilities. Even still, the determined youth continued to research his quirks and practice. The targeted teenager researched training regimens, getting himself into proper shape for the exams. He studied what he needed to exercise more to account for his quirks usage, and discovered that his once annoying secondary quirk kept his blood flow at a steady and constant state, giving him more endurance than normal. One day, while testing for and thinking about the hero exams, his pulse seemed to quicken. Izuku blinked in surprise. He took a breath, trying to clear his mind thanks to a hypothesis hastily formed, and felt his heart rate drop to a far steadier level. This was perhaps the biggest breakthrough for him, studying how to control his own thoughts via meditation and the like. The studious youth gained greater control of his heartbeat, which gave him even further control over his blast. Throughout all of this, he was given the gift of constant visits from All Might, who helped him to get into proper shape. The workouts were fresh hell, but they got serious results. By the time the entrance exams had rolled around, the once scrawny fanboy had become a well-toned quirk user. The abilities bestowed upon All for One's victim had bloomed into a splendid gift to the schoolboy, and he was eternally grateful for the circumstances he was put through. As he gained further control over his own mind and body, All Might grew increasingly impressed. The number one hero's own time was coming to a close, and he had to make a decision soon. The candidates found by his allies left much to be desired by All Might. Nobody that the man had met had been quite up to snuff. The entrance exams, however, would tell the hero all he'd need to know. Why leave him with those quirks, master? You could always go back and steal them again. He doesn't deserve your gifts. Shigaraki scratched at his face as he spoke, clearly worried about All for One's actions. However, his mentor gently reassured him. There's no need to worry. I shall take those quirks of mine back when I need to. For now, let him think he has a chance. Let the world show him how cruel it can be, and perhaps he'll come to his senses. As if on cue, a small patrol burst into the bar, panting. The lead villain spoke. Sir, we have the intel on all the applicants for the exams this year, and we also have confirmation that UA will indeed be hiring All Might as a teacher. The amalgamation of abilities grinned beneath his helmet, chuckling. He accepted the manila envelope from his small crew before opening another sludge portal and taking a step towards it, but paused. Shigaraki kindly thanked these double agents for their work. Laughing maniacally, the criminal overlord passed into the portal and his protege grinned broadly. The individuals who delivered the information looked quite panicked, and as a couple turned to run, the door locked behind them. The blue-haired antagonist removed his hand mask, revealing his horrific grin. Before anyone could make a move, the floor erupted with a dozen sludge portals, Nomus grabbing tight onto the heroes in disguise. The head hero's illusions faded, showing several lesser-known rescuers grouped together. They all began to struggle within the grip of the man-made monstrosities, but they couldn't budge. Tamura simply grinned wider and, one by one, fully wrapped his hand around the captured do-gooders' faces. Neither the heroes nor their screams left the bar. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 3 of What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. You're going to do just fine, young Midoriya. The words of the number one hero echoed within Izuku's mind as he took his first step towards the gates to his future. The bus ride was cramped to say the least, and the entire time it felt as though a pair of prying eyes were plastered to the multi-quirk teen, but he did his best to ignore them and focus on strategy. Each bot is worth a number of points based on difficulty. Present mic had resounded, and that big fourth bot. Don't you worry about it. That's just a bit of an obstacle we're tossing right at ya. Just focus on the ones worth the most points and do your best. Plus Ultra. The green-haired student took a deep breath as he looked at the gates, shimmering in the morning sun. The glint of the sunlight was just bright enough to create a halo around the archway ahead of him, the cityscape gorgeously constructed. The quirkified teen prepped his earbuds. He found it easier to use his abilities and control his thoughts with accompanying music. Then, before he knew it, he was on the ground. Midoriya tried to sit up, but sitting on top of him was the cause of his unexpected meeting with the pavement, a young girl. Her eyes glimmered amber, bleached blonde hair let down over her shoulders. Her smile was broad and she seemed to be giggling and blushing uncontrollably. Her fair skin was hidden underneath a tan sweater, which was contrasted with a relatively short, navy blue skirt. She had pinned the anxious teen by both arms beneath her, eyes wild with curiosity and excitement. I had no idea they'd have such cute boys here. I'm so glad I came here. I'm Toga, Himiko Toga. Please make sure you remember me. What's your name? The energetic young lady leaned in closer, staring directly into Izuku's eyes. Her breath was hot against his face, which was now a vibrant shade of red, and he stuttered uncontrollably, barely being able to answer. My name is Izuku. Izuku, Toga swooned, finally letting him up as she dramatically swayed around. Izuku, Izuku, such a delicious name. Izuku, she began giggling again, before both decided to check the crowd, which was now fully through the gate. The two examinees scrambled to their feet, Himiko accomplishing this far faster than the flustered boy she had leapt on, and they pushed their way through the doors. Most of the bots near the entrance had already been destroyed, so while the shaky teen she had greeted looked around for more bots near the entrance in a panic, the blood-sucking beauty decided she'd make a mad dash for the back of the arena. She leapt and arched over buildings, grabbing an old pipe on her way to the bots far from the gates. Himiko began wildly bashing at the nearby bots, laughing aloud and grinning ear to ear. She counted not the number of points she got, but the number of bots she broke whose lights turned off. The violent girl twirled and danced around the other participants, stealing points and keeping out of the way of attacks that would otherwise hit her. After a couple minutes of this, the jubilant young lady grew bored of the bots, instead wanting to attack the students nearby. She had to physically hold herself back, recalling All for One's words to her. Just remember, Himiko, do not draw blood from anyone while you're there. It will not only remove you from the area, but may unravel this whole plan. I'm counting on you. Huffing and mumbling complaints to herself, she watched the other students hunt down every last bot in the area. The amber-eyed aggressor leaned against the wall, one foot set against it with her arms crossed. She felt the urge to attack something with that delicious red liquid nearly overcame the teen engulfed in bloodlust. Suddenly, as if on cue, a tremendous rumble sprouted from the center of the arena. Toga looked up, giggling and starry-eyed, running towards it with a ferocious glee. The sudden shockwave had knocked buildings loose and caused others to crumble, showering threatening debris all around the malicious maiden. She expertly maneuvered around the projectiles, sliding beneath some and flipping over others. Just as she was nearing the bot, however, something went wrong. Himiko's leg was slammed by a hunk of debris she didn't see. She yelped in pain and was knocked down hard. Further crumbling plasterboard and shards of rebar rocketed down and plowed them alongside and atop the unconscious girl's body, and all the other participants fled out of sheer panic. Her vision grew blurry, and she saw the gargantuan robot in her peripheral vision. She felt herself tear up, and before the growing vignette around her vision could fully consume her sightline, she cried out a single word. Izuku. Midoriya had been momentarily frozen in anxiety, seeing absolutely zero bots for him to destroy. However, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted the girl who had just tackled him to the ground bolt towards the back of the arena, and suddenly, it clicked. He wouldn't find any bots at the front, the back would be abundant. Nobody would have gone there yet. Sure enough, as the teary-eyed teenager arrived at the scene, he discovered his hypothesis to be true. The students were few and far between, while the mock villains ran rampant. He took a breath, turned on Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, skipped to the most energetic portion of the song at maximum volume in his earbuds, and went to town rendering metal from metal with powerful bursts of energy. The young examinee seemed to gracefully stride around the battlefield, rhythms evident in his movements, yet Izuku's body stood rigid and his attacks landed hard. Every pulse was right on rhythm. Every step a lead up into his next attack, every leap aimed at a new bot. A few students grew distracted by his work, pausing momentarily with their most recent coat crumpled beneath them. Awestruck eyes scanned the scene before them, incredulous at the wreckage caused by a single boy with a pair of earbuds. Midoriya's malachite-tinted blasts were right on rhythm with his music. The focused student's mind empty save for the notes reverberating in his ears. He allowed his natural reflexes to take control, forcing the rhythm into his actions. Before he knew it, his score was rocketing beyond the other students. He didn't think about numbers or points, nor did he consider what the other students were doing or plotting. Izuku Midoriya was focused purely on his goal, and the fierce determination in his eyes ignited his destructive dance to all who saw it. Not too long after he was getting into the rhythm, the earbudded student felt a massive rumble resonate throughout the battlefield. It shook his rhythm, caught him off balance, and allowed a villain to smack the freckled fighter clean across the road. He slowly stood up, holding his head with a hand. Once his vision came back after a second or two, Midoriya saw all the other students bolting away. They ran from something, but the wide-eyed brawler couldn't quite identify what. Then he heard something. A familiar voice, a familiar name, not too terribly far away. It was hard to hear over the paired rumbling that grew more violent, and the growth of the noise was alarmingly rapid. The passionate young man paused his music and turned to face the noises. What the teen saw was a familiar face. A face with eyes closed and mouth slightly open, body buried beneath broken buildings. A face with no sign of consciousness. A face lying in the direct path of a bot whose rumbles were easily identifiable as the cause of the green-haired teen's earlier performance hiccup. Without even thinking, Midoriya launched himself to his feet and ran to the rubble, rapidly swapping his music to the apex of Hall of the Mountain King as he scrambled to save the young blonde. Looking up at the bot, then at the young girl, the panicked young man felt a surge of energy. He felt a release of fatigue, an urge deep within his gut. His mind cleared unexpectedly, and he held both of his hands out. His heart rate grew ever more rapid to match the beat of the classical rhythm blaring in his ears. Izuku's arms bulged from overexerted muscles prying every last ounce of strength from him, his legs tensing to their fullest extent to ground him in place. In a massive, dazzling flash that even awoke the previously unconscious Himiko, Midoriya launched a pair of pulses that drove him partially into the ground and skewered the robot. Its center had a massive, perfectly circular hole punched through it, and with a sickeningly wet snap, the green-haired savior's ankles gave out, whipping him first into the hard asphalt, bashing the back of his head in the middle of his spine in the process, and then launching him away from the bot, head over heels. The ensuing shockwave managed to knock some of the rubble off of Himiko, who was able to shove the rest off to scramble over to the young boy who had just saved her life. She ignored the pain of her broken leg as she struggled to writhe over to her savior. Before the rescued blonde could see how wounded the freckled fighter was, she heard a massive creaking noise. The blast Izuku had set off had even managed to push the bot into the air a few yards, and as it landed, the inner workings began to fragment and ricochet around the cityscape. The overzealous girl covered the young boy with her body, holding him close and tight, blushing all the while. After she felt a few stray fragments scrape her back and sides, she looked over the teenage laser cannon. Aside from having seemingly bruised several spots on his body and breaking his ankles, the unconscious boy seemed to be safe. Toga silently and proudly patted herself on the back for keeping any shards from hurting him further. As she saw blood drip from some of his various open wounds, she resisted the intense urge to lick them clean, instead opting to lay him down with his head in her lap. She readjusted herself so she could lean against the building before passing out herself, body still riddled with broken glass and warped metal. Before she allowed herself to fully pass out, she reminded herself about why she was really here. I'm here to get intel for the League. For my school. I'm here too. She stopped herself, remembering why she wanted to help the weird hand guy. She wanted life to be easier, to make living in this world easier. She wanted to replicate her idol, Stain. But the blue-haired freak she was teaming up with didn't think it was such a good idea. She wanted to go to the villain's school because she wanted to see what school would be like with people who accepted who she really was. But that hand guy, he didn't accept her goals. He was against what she wanted to do, or at least didn't think of her dreams as any sort of real goal. Just like her parents, just like her old schools, and just like the rest of the world, she felt a resolve harden inside of her to truly be the next Mr. Staney. The fading young lady looked down longingly at the first person she'd ever protected, the first person who didn't immediately reject her, and who actually cared about her enough to help her out of a sticky situation. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to stay longer than planned. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 4 of What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. Midoriya shuddered before forcing his eyes open. The sunlight was glaring and it took a moment for his eyes to adjust, before he saw a familiar face looking over him sleeping. Yelping, the nervous teen leapt back before having his arm buckle. His body let itself drop and he banged his head against the hard ground. All at once, the pain caught up with his body and he yelped in pain, noting the bruises lining his arms and legs. He attempted to stand before being painfully reminded of his broken ankles. Toga's look turned concerned as Izuku rubbed the back of his head before noticing one of the pretty girl's legs was bent at an odd angle. The freckled fighter covered his mouth in horror, but Himiko seemed unfazed. "Why your leg?" Midoriya muttered. "My leg will be fine. We need to tend to your injuries. I heard your bones fracture from a decent distance away." "I know of a nearby place." The crazed teen stopped short as a short, old woman came hobbling towards them. A group of students followed behind her, concerned and awestruck. Without another word, she kissed the green-haired hero on the forehead, and all his limbs slowly felt less fragile. She turned to Toga who, after a few moments of surprise, held up a hand in resistance and tried to stand, but couldn't. Heaving a sigh, the graceful gladiator bowed her head and allowed the nurse to heal her, which the old woman did amusedly. The injured blonde's leg was slowly slipped back into place before suddenly setting with a snap, and her cuts and bruises faded quickly. This elicited yet another odd response from the odd girl. Abruptly, the two examinees nearly collapsed in tandem due to a massive wave of fatigue. Toga caught herself before the teary teen next to her, supporting him before he could fall. The two made eye contact, and Midoriya looked away flustered. Toga giggled with a close-eyed smile. The nurse smiled with them before gesturing for the duo to follow. The pair of students walked along together, supporting one another. Himiko looked at Izuku again, who was focused on the path in front of him, and she realized that she didn't want to let go. She didn't want to go back to headquarters with what little intel she'd collected. For perhaps the first time in her life, Himiko Toga wanted to make life easier for someone else. Memories of arguments flashed through the blonde bombshell's mind, and she settled on a single one to constantly replay, justifying her decision to stay with this boy. "I want to become Mr. Staney. I want to kill Mr. Staney." Himiko giddily rattled off her basic drives to this new, strange man wearing hands all over. She was happy as could be, excited to be a part of something that would make the world so much easier to live in. "You don't have to say what you haven't been asked." The ecstatic teen was caught mildly off guard at this. She wasn't expecting such a response from this blue-haired boy. "Geez, everyone's so hung up about Stain." "Stain? I don't like it." Himiko stood her ground, unmoved and cheery as could be, but was a little stung by how much their new partner Tamura was trash-talking her dreams of Mr. Staney. Of course, this didn't show on her face once. "I don't feel good." The teenage bloodsucker didn't need to look at Dabai to know he also felt this sinking feeling. The primal instinct that told them combat was mere inches away. "You're all no good." Shigaraki immediately lunged at the newfound pair of villains, and the duo leapt into action in kind. Thankfully, Kurogiri was behind the counter and deftly opened up portals, forcing every thrown attack to miss. The trio of baddies paused, taking a breath. Shigaraki recoiled his hands, scratching at his face vigorously. "I'm sick of hearing about Stain. Shut up about him and we'll get along just fine." The young teen kept grinning, but inside, she felt a pang of insecurity about joining the league. Maybe she was too hasty. She felt she had to defend her choices a bit. "But Mr. Staney is so cool. All that blood he draws." All the slicing and dicing the giddy girl was interrupted by a barstool ripped from the floor and flung towards her. As she tried to dodge, a portal opened up in front of her and caught the projectile, harmlessly dropping it on the floor off to the side. "I hate Stain. Shut up about him already. Hear me." Tamura was clearly increasing aggression, and Himiko was tugged away by the shady man who had brought her here. Huffing, the blonde teen crossed her arms and looked away. Something kept bugging her, though, something eating at her deep within her psyche. She tried to shake it away, but couldn't. Despite her consciously demanding herself to stick with this crowd, she couldn't remove that bit of doubt from her mind. Once he got a good night's rest, Midoriya kept training harder than ever before. He didn't think about the results of the test when training, instead focusing on getting better with his quirk. Shortly after trying to practice without headphones, his mother ran outside with a letter addressed to the freckled fighter, and it was from Yue. Rushing home, Midoriya skidded to a stop in his room and opened the envelope in front of his mom, anxiety at an all-time high. After clattering onto the table, the hologram flashed to life and showed an image of All Might. Midoriya, starry-eyed, was now sure to lock onto every word, and his mother smiled with tears in her eyes. "Young Midoriya, I am here as a projection." Flexing a little bit, All Might turned to show off his full form. He froze in place, talking to someone off-screen briefly and just out of earshot, before continuing. I have your results right here, young Midoriya. I won't deny it, you didn't claim terribly many combat points. Compared to others, 24 points is relatively mediocre." Midoriya froze, eyes dying slightly. His mom rubbed his back comfortingly, turning back to the message in a panic, almost as if urging All Might to get this over with. However, this test is for heroes, and my goodness, young man, you are the prime example of a hero. The watery-eyed teen, alongside his mother, looked at the recording confusedly. Not only did you save an unconscious combatant without worrying about your own score or well-being, but you used what should be a scar as your sword. You have not only impressed me, but the entire school. The teary student's eyes began streaming tears in tandem with his mom's. Young Midoriya, you have achieved 60 whole rescue points, raising your score well above first place to be a whopping 84 total points. The mother and son pair cried crocodile tears as they heard this, hugging each other close, relief and joy gushing within their minds. Their jubilant sobbing was interrupted by an excited knock on the door. The two wiped their eyes as Midoriya made his way to the front of the house and checked to see who it is. He saw nothing out of the peephole, and opened the door, looking around both corners of the house. Ahem, muttered a voice from below the green-haired teen. He looked down and gasped, realizing just who it was. Principal Nezu waddled into the Midoriya residence with a smile and a bow. Hello, my name is Nezu, and I am the principal of UA. Nice to meet you. The bipedal animal extended a hand, and Midoriya happily shook it with a smile. It's nice to meet you. But why are you here, sir? Midoriya questioned. Nezu nodded and sighed, looking up at the family of two. It has come to my attention that a very particular villain had attacked you, Izuku, and I also understand that this has led you to claim a couple quirks as your own. Suddenly, the anxious teen grew concerned and nervous. Did this disqualify him, since they weren't his quirks? He didn't remember seeing a rule about it, but maybe. Almost as if reading Izuku's mind, the principal held up a hand. Please, allow me to explain before doing some mental gymnastics. You see, it is true that those quirks are not your own. In all sincerity, they were most likely stolen from an individual and placed within you. However, it is next to impossible to return them to their rightful owners, especially considering the crowd they were tied into which allowed them to get their quirks taken. As a side note, it seems these quirks have fused inside your body, thanks to the tests you took in the hospital. We believe that this is due to the quirk compatibility, and from here on out, I believe it to be appropriate to call this power your quirk. The tearful teen choked up at this a little bit, and his mother hugged him close. The principal continued. That being said, I believe it best you stick to the tutelage of All Might, one of our newest teachers. You might have heard of him. The mini chimera smirked at this, and Midoriya grew starry-eyed at the mention of his savior's and role model's name. He may have told you already, but he's here mainly to teach. I have ensured you are in all of his classes, and he has promised to help you keep up a training regimen outside of school. I also wanted to congratulate you on one of the highest scores in the history of UA. Face growing serious, the quirked mammal continued. You have been given such an odd and blessed gift, young Midoriya. Please go down the right path with it. The freckled fighter was taken aback briefly, but soon regained his composure and nodded. Of course. Good. Now, Miss Midoriya, a moment. I wish to briefly review the plans we made for this school year last week, involving a certain someone. Oh, of course, the befuddled parent replied, bringing the principal off to a side room as they began to chat. Peeking outside the front door, Izuku saw the car that Nezu had arrived in, and there were a pair of silhouettes in the backseat that he didn't initially recognize. Losing his sense of time, he began to zone out, attempting to deduce who else could be in the vehicle. A tap on his back launched him back into reality and made him jump, the green-haired teen only calming once he saw it was his mom and the principal. He tilted his head, confused. Sir, who else came with you? I see 2 more people in the backseat. Should I worry about it? Yet again, the mini chimera held up a hand, then gestured out the door, a signal for the pair to get out of the back of the vehicle. As they stood up straight, Izuku's eyes grew wide and his mind imploded with questions he couldn't voice. Out of the car first came an older, scrawny figure, not much taller than Midoriya himself. His hair was a dandelion yellow, and he wore a loose-fitting suit and tie. His cadence was one of mild defeat, but his eyes, something about his eyes reminded the young man of the #1 hero. Before he could ask about him, the other figure leapt out alongside him. Her upper body was covered by a tan sweater, evidently hand-knitted, and beneath it she wore a relatively short navy blue skirt. Her amber eyes shone brightly, and her hair was done up in double buns. Even more confused than before, the befuddled boy turned to the quirked anomaly in confusion. Nezu simply smiled. I told your mother not to inform you until this time came about. Young Midoriya, meet Himiko Toga, a young girl who turned herself over to the law just so she could come to our school. With her as a bodyguard to you and probation officer to her. His name isn't important, and if it is, he'll tell you. Turning to the awestruck teen, Nezu gave a wide grin. Izuku Midoriya, you will be living with Himiko Toga and this probation officer for the few months before school starts, and I want you to help ensure she stays on the right path. I know it's a lot to unload all of a sudden, but please trust me when I say we've set up every safety measure to protect you and your family. And do not worry about school costs. This exchange will ensure you go to this school free of charge. He looked his new student in the eyes with such confidence and determination that Izuku found it difficult not to return the look to some degree. As I said, you've got quite the opportunity here. Please never stray from the path of a hero. With that, Nezu walked back to the car and helped the newcomers unpack their things. Without skipping a beat, Himiko tackled her hero in a massive bear hug, grinning and giggling wildly. Midoriya, despite being nervous and unsure for most of his life, was determined to follow through with his dream. For the first time in the past several months, the anxious boy genuinely smiled. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 5 of What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, and so we begin. Toga woke in a cold sweat, feeling the ethereal hands of All For One clasped around her throat. She knew the criminal overlord wasn't here, but the blonde bloodsucker could feel the malice returning to her mind that remained ever present while in the quirk amalgamation's presence. Emiko's usual, violent ways began to re-emerge out of necessity, knowing that if they were to be suppressed any longer, she would forfeit her sanity. A failed mission was akin to a death sentence to boot, and so far, she hadn't gotten any intel she could hold on to. She noted that everyone around her was still asleep, and something within Toga's mind clicked. Rapidly scanning the room for anything to draw the sweet nectar of veins, the psychotic teen's gaze finally rested upon a kitchen knife set, pristinely squared upon the counter. With silent and practiced movements, Toga brandished the butcher's knife, feeling a semi-familiar weight in her hands. The weight of it snapped her out of her bloodlust, however, and reminded the blonde bombshell that she needed to stay undercover. Himiko's hand was incredulously hesitant to put down the weapon. The young criminal turned to Midoriya's mother, sleeping in peace and tranquility. Her bloodlust returned with a specific goal, to get closer to Izuku. What better way to get close to him than to get close to his mother? Himiko shuffled silently into the freckled hero's parents' room, unable to hold back a couple brisk giggles. She tentatively raised the knife above her head, knees bent towards one another slightly, face blushed and eyes alive. She thought about holding Izuku in her arms, of consoling him and loving him, of revealing herself once enough time had passed. She blinked out of her stupor, now laser-focused on the task at hand being completed as efficiently and silently as possible. The murderous adolescent plunged the knife downwards, prepared for a beautiful shower of savory blood, and drew nothing. Her arms were halted by powerful limbs, far stronger than she could imagine on the average person. She looked up, pouting, and saw the weird man that accompanied Toga to her beloved's home. The playful act of the self-reported villain was torn to shreds when she laid her eyes upon the officers. Practically erupting with raw, unbridled determination and protective instincts, his face was solid and stern. He wore his frown plainly and effectively, even making the blonde bloodsucker question her actions. His posture was absolute, his position immovable. Himiko's body began to shake slightly, but not due to excitement. No, this was far different than excitement. This was bad. This was a sinking feeling she'd never known before, mind reeling and gut contorting until the vampiric mimic felt fully helpless and paralyzed. Toga feared what would happen to her. Would her cover be blown? Would she be sent to jail? Would she be slapped into death row? As her mind flashed countless images and her body reacted with intense acrobatics, the sadistic student looked at her arms. They were being slowly but firmly pulled away. Not hard enough to hurt but not gentle enough to let her fight back. The knife was easily and respectfully removed from Toga's hands, and the bodyguard simply sighed, slumping over. And just what do you think you're doing, Toga? We went over this. You need to be on your best behavior to prove you really want to attend UA. Stabbing a young man's mother is not going to further your goal. If anything, it'll send you back to square one. Himiko looked at the knife, then at the guard, and finally at Mama Midoriya, heaving a sigh and puffing out her cheeks childishly. The blonde bombshell whimpered. I just wanted to get closer to Mrs. Midoriya so I could get closer to Izuku. At this, the scrawny security officer scratched the back of his head, leading Toga back out to the kitchen. He put the knife away as he talked, preparing some tea quietly as possible. Get closer to him by hurting his mother. How would that help? That's what people never get. Himiko turned away, but something within the vampiric mimic urged her to keep talking. Whether it was passion or a subconscious cry for help, she couldn't be sure. I want to get close to people, get to know them. The best way to do that is to be them, and I can do that. Nobody ever gives me the chance willingly, so I need to take any chances I can get. She looked up to the rail-thin man, who just sighed and gave her a sad, concerned smile. Himiko, you must realize that people don't want you to be them. They want you to be you. If people want to get to know you, then they need to know you and not someone who you turn into for a limited time. They also don't want you to be them. Does that make sense? The empathetic officer eyed the sadistic teen, looking for any sign of recognition. There, of course, wasn't any. But you gotta become them and their loved ones. You need to get close and taste what it's like to be them, to feel it and to live it. It's the highest honor, the greatest gift, and the officer held up a hand to pause the captured criminal. They sat in silence for a moment, the bodyguard trying to figure out how to explain his thoughts. Let me put it this way. If you truly care about someone, truly love someone, then you don't want to crawl into their skin or live in their shoes. You want to hold them close, treasure them, keep them from harm. You want to keep them close, keep them safe, keep them as them. If they love you back, or even care about you at all, then they'll want the same for you. Would you like it if you went home to loving parents and one day they were totally different people? This gave Himiko pause. She'd never thought of it like that. She hated her parents, but she thought about if they'd become that way after supporting her, and the vampiric mimic loathed the notion. She shook her head, trying to clear out the cacophony currently residing within. But then, how do I show them I care about them? If they want me to be me, how do I show them that I want to be close to them? At this, the guard laughed. Toga huffed immaturely. Come on, Toga. Do you really need to ask? You show them you care by listening to what they like and gifting it to them in some way as a surprise. You show you're going to be there, and you carry them through rough times. That goes for friends, family, and lovers alike. Thinking quickly to appeal to her ego while also trying to aid the blood-sucking blonde. Young Himiko, I believe you could have a shot with Midoriya. You two are around the same age and will be starting off in the same grade level. If you want to stay with him, then you need to start. Relationships take time and hard work. Himiko scoffed, turning away. Of course it's hard. Everything has to be hard. That's why I wanted to be a villain. Life is so hard. Here you are just reinforcing it. At this, the bodyguard chuckled softly. Himiko, Toga, anything and everything in life worth having takes hard work. Villains try taking the easy way out and cheat others out of their hard work, and life gets hard for them. Heroes work hard from the start, and others are more inspired to work hard with us. If you want life to be easier, you need to work harder. Okay, HMPH. The psychotic teen yet again fell silent, indignant to the end but clearly understanding what this odd guard said. She turned around, ignoring the cup of tea that the bodyguard was pouring her. The guard merely smiled, pouring his own tea and returning to his post. The blood-sucking bombshell put her head down on the table, exhaling a shaky breath. She ensured her face was fully obscured. Her beliefs were flipped on their head, her mind constantly slamming into itself with further logic and connections only now being made clear, and it was making the teenage killer irritated. She felt something roll down her cheek, so the vampiric mimic buried her face further into her arms. Himiko Toga refused to let anyone here see her cry. Night fell in full effect as Achako's phone buzzed wildly beneath her side. She reflexively picked it up and turned off the alarm without looking at it. Tear-stained cheeks and tired, puffy eyes not even acknowledging its existence. Her pillow, ruined with tear stains, was tossed to the side as Achako practically threw herself out of bed, silently sneaking out of her window. She looked back once, only once, and gave a silent, tearful apology to her parents before using her quirk to float to the ground safely. I need to help them earn more, the gorgeous gravity manipulator muttered to herself, wiping the tears from her face. She ran as fast as she could, constantly checking the roughly scrawled address on the paper she was given yesterday. She made sure to give herself enough time to be early, missing sleep because of what she was going to do. If this is my only chance, then I need to take it, she said to herself pseudo-confidently, mind still racked with grief. As she entered, her gaze was fixed behind her, so she fell flat on her rear when she came mere centimeters away from perhaps the most intimidating figure she'd ever seen. A man, easily 6 feet tall and wearing a suit and horrid mask, chuckled with a voice made of gravel and tar. He extended a hand to the young girl, the name Ochako Uraraka written roughly on his palm in black pen. The gravitational girl began trembling in fear, eyes going blank and mind growing foggy, before snapping herself out of it with a slap to her own face. She reached out and accepted the villain's hand confidently. My, you really are quite the determined one, aren't you, Ochako? It seems I may have been brash in my judgment of you. Tell me, you wish to ensure your family's financial security, do you not? I do. Ochako swallowed hard, biting her lip to keep herself from crying before forcefully halting her body's shaking. She bowed her head to the intimidating figure, as she was instructed to by the informant sent to her. Excellent. Now, I must inform you that this next part is going to be somewhat unpleasant. The billowing boss hesitated before placing a hand against Ochako Uraraka's head, and almost instantly, Ochako recoiled from the immense pain. Her mind ached and her body heaved, spasming with the new power imbued within her. Tears streamed out of her face as the levitating lass began foaming from the mouth, eyes nearly dying. Something within them, though, something in Uraraka's eyes refused to let go. Slowly but surely, her hand reached up and grabbed the hand of All for One, further pushing it weakly but steadily against her own forehead. At this, All for One grinned broadly. Taking off the mask, the conglomeration of quirks only smiled wider as this inexperienced youth urged him to give her more. I won't give I in. Uraraka's eyes suddenly flared to life, determination nearly rivaling that of All Might. This prompted a minor shift backwards from All for One himself, who was simply becoming further enthralled by this newcomer. Then let me see if I can't optimize you. All for One bellowed, cackling as a massive wave of power imploded within the gravity girl. Her eyes immediately went black, her body crumpling to the ground and convulsing. Her mouth was frothing with spittle, eyes rolled back into her head, spine and pelvis struck hard by the concrete floor. The pain was too great, the power far too much at once, and Ochako lost consciousness. However, one last thought slipped through her mind, a realization. I'm still alive. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to part 6 season 1 of What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. Izuku, can we talk for a little bit? Himiko approached the freckled fighter, rubbing her arm nervously. This was highly unusual for Toga, and Midoriya took note of the past month they had spent together. Not once did she show any sign of meekness. Oh, of course, Himiko. What is it? The green-haired helper inquired. He tilted his head slightly, both curious and somewhat surprised. After glancing in their guard's position, the blood-sucking blonde took a deep breath before erupting into a massive, stupid grin like her normal self. This time, though, it didn't seem so intimidating. I like you. Like, really like you. And the pseudo-changeling rubbed the back of her neck, yet again glancing back at the officer who merely gave her a sidelong glance and a thumbs up. When her eyes returned to the heroic team before her, his face was fire engine red, hidden behind his hands. Izuku, I know we're both gonna go to the hero course, but I really want to go out with you. You're really cute and I could just hug you forever, and I don't know how to really show it any other proper way. Usually I would just try and be someone to show them I love them and want them to be mine. But I like you the way you are. I don't need to be you to show you I care for you, right? At this point, once the blonde bombshell turned to her heart's desire, Midoriya might as well have passed out. He was sputtering, and his hands fidgeted with his hair when not covering his beet red face. He couldn't properly form a sentence. But Toga was patient and waited for the flustered fanboy to collect himself a bit more. I guess. As long as you know my schoolwork and TR training is T-top priority for me right now. After getting out a few words, Izuku took a deep and shaky breath. He looked the vampiric mimic in the eyes and, shaky yet determined, reaffirmed his sentiments. A glint of mischievous and perhaps even primal need flashed in her eyes. "So do you want to have our first kiss now or later?" At this, Midoriya could hardly get out the K sound before passing out, cheeks burning red hot. Himiko giggled as the guard stormed over to the pair and ensured the flustered lad was safe and sound. The officer chuckled softly and shook his head after ensuring Izuku's security. "Himiko, that's a little too soon, don't you think? There are a lot of milestones in a relationship, and your first kiss should be something special. Remember to take it at a pace you're both comfortable with, and don't rush it. If it's meant to be, it will be, yeah. But Mr. Guard, why do people need to go slow? Why not go all in and forget about beating around the bush? If it's meant to be, it'll work out, right?" At this, the officer smiled, shaking his head and attempting to collect his thoughts in a straightforward commentary. "Himiko, there are a lot of reasons, but the most important one is how their mental state is. You may not have heard, and don't tell anyone I told you this, but Izuku there recently underwent a lot of trauma at the hands of a quirk-giving villain." The room suddenly gained a strained and tense air. The officer could tell Toga knew exactly who All For One was, and that was not good for him or for the family he wished to help protect. If she was in a league with that villain, then who knows what her real goals could be. Maybe she had a second quirk he wasn't aware of, or maybe she knew who he was already and was sent to kill him. As nervous as this train of thought made the shriveled savior, the doubt of this as being reality kept All Might from leaping to full defense. The number one hero knew that this charismatic convict was being genuine. He'd seen enough liars to tell when someone was attempting to be manipulative, and having every conceivable sign checked off as non-present, there was but a single conclusion for the symbol of peace. This vampiric mimic truly did care about his student. The mind of Toga, meanwhile, was forced to fight off the urge to blast in All For One's door and crush him for hurting her Izuku. Her mind, for the first time in years, was dealing with a jumble of emotions instead of just one or two at a time. She hated the feeling, but there was something else that came with this cavalcade of feelings. A passion, a burning want deep within the pseudo-changeling. Himiko wanted nothing more than to help heal Izuku from whatever All For One did to him. She felt proud of herself for actually avoiding her quirk as a lean-to. And despite confusion on pace and expressions of love, the blood-sucking blonde realized that this course of action was much easier and more fulfilling than anything she'd attempted in the past. The advice of this geezer had genuinely helped her, which was unfortunately a statement the blonde bombshell simply couldn't honestly admit about any other elder she'd met to date. Toga knew being a hero was important for the freckled fighter, and from what she'd seen, it was integrated into the green-haired examinee's very being. If letting him go on his way meant she'd be able to care for the adorable overachiever, love him and be loved by him, then Himiko would gladly let herself come in after all schoolwork got taken care of. Despite all of the advice given to her by this mysterious officer, she couldn't help but mentally complain about something that ate at her bit by bit for years before now. If there was anyone who could answer this question honestly and intelligently, it would be the spindly man directly in front of her. Clearing her throat, Toga responded to the undercover hero's statement. "I understand that, but that's why I want to hurry this along. I want to get close to him as soon as possible so that I can help him, so I can really love him and so he can really love me. Why can't it be that easy, Mr. Guard?" Toga was genuinely disheartened at this point, the question clearly bothering her to a significant degree. The parole officer crossed his arms as he tilted his head up in contemplation. "If I have to guess, I'd imagine it's not easy because nothing easy is worth the time. Putting effort towards something means you really want it, and it means it'll be more rewarding when you finally do get a hold of it." The hero in disguise rubbed his neck with a hand, looking down in more serious concentration. "I know you want life to be easy, Himiko. I really do get it. Nobody likes things to be difficult. Sometimes, though, it's a necessary part of life. If everything were easy, then difficulty wouldn't exist. It's like war and peace, or like life and death. And sometimes, it's worth it to put your all into something, or someone, and then some. To go beyond, plus ultra." All Might ended this with a flamboyant fist pump, which made the pseudo-changeling smile a little bit. However, his tidbit of knowledge gave the blood-sucking blonde pause, forcing her to consider what she truly wanted. The odd duo sat in thoughtful silence for a while before Himiko sighed. Snapping herself out of the daydreaming state she put herself in, then walked into the heroic examinee's bedroom. Before the guard could get a word out, a bit afraid of what she would do within the young man's room, Toga came back with a blanket, carefully and quietly covering up Izuku. "Mr. Guard, I don't like talking about myself. Nobody gets me, you know, but him." The motherly murderer lovingly looked in the direction of her love interest. "Maybe he doesn't get me, but he cares about me. It doesn't matter that he doesn't get me, he gave me a chance, and he saved me. I may not be able to bring up much more than that, but..." The pseudo-changeling looked up at All Might with a genuine, soft, kind smile. This caught him off balance, and what came next made him choke up a bit. "Thank you for stopping me from doing things I know I'd regret. I didn't know how else to." Shaking her head, the blood-sucking bombshell giggled, giving one of her trademark smiles. "You're just a nice guy, you know that, Mr. Guard." Achako's body ached, her mind reeling. The quirks were constantly being applied and removed, trying to fit every puzzle piece in a box together one by one through trial and error. She couldn't let herself talk anymore, unless the levitating lady wanted to forfeit her brain functions. The feeling of getting parts that weren't hers sewn into her essence, her very being, only to be ripped off like a bandage. None of them felt right in her body. And the thought of having generations of people skimming her very DNA causing her to nearly gag on more than one occasion. She knew that All For One wanted to make her suffer, wanted to test this newcomer's resolve. The gravitational girl held on with any mental handhold she could possibly grip. And through it all, the conglomeration of quirks grew ever more impressed. Finally, after far too long, the criminal overlord gave Uraraka some breathing room. He removed his hand from her head, allowing her to come back to her senses. The floating student collapsed onto the floor in a heap, vomiting and coughing, before wiping off her mouth with her coat sleeve and discarding it to her side. The amalgamation of abilities grinned broadly as he looked over his latest work. Despite the pain she'd gone through before, Ochako felt fine now. Staring at her new mutations in disbelief, the levitating lass prodded at her arm. It was now layered in a number of odd plates or scales of some sort. At a certain angle, it seemed to reflect its surroundings, effective tactical camouflage. In addition, the gravitational girl felt energetic and light on her feet. Her gut felt far better than it usually did, on account of excessive and exhaustive quirk practice. Her skin had faded to a duller navy blue color, and looking at her eyes through her reflective scales, she noted her irises had turned a shade of hot pink. The levitating lass soon noticed one detail she hadn't seen before. A small horn, tan and how she'd imagine a unicorn horn would look, rested directly above her right eye, just below her hairline upon her forehead. She gently touched it, surprised at how sharp it was. The time-space tinkerer looked back to All For One in confusion. Without needing to speak a word, Uraraka knew he wanted the latest amalgamation of his creation to head inside the school. With a smile, Ochako gladly obliged, perhaps a bit too curious at how much stronger she had become. All For One took a refreshing breath as we watched his newest custom-made Namu enter the school. He couldn't help but proudly pat himself on the back for such impeccable handiwork. Now to dispose of the latest body. Amy or something, was it? The criminal overlord couldn't quite remember. It was a short, sweet name for one with a short, sweet life. He chuckled. This sort of irony always tickled him. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials. I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Season 1 Part 7 What If Villains Had an Academia. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. The crisp, autumn air carried with it the mild scent of coffee, students claiming their daily caffeine in an attempt to prepare for the first day of training. The walkway was overwhelmed with the clattering and shuffling of half-awake quirk users, vainly attempting to reorganize their thoughts while finding their homerooms in time for the vindictive bell. However, one unexpected scene transpired beside the students shortly after the school opened its doors. A pair linked arm in arm, both popular in the news for opposing reasons. Since the events had been finalized and items had been straightened out, the story of a hospital's odd villain attack, with certain detail expunged from the record, for safety's sake, and the urban legend gone reality of an ex-convict becoming a student at the school had erupted from newspapers. Classes were shifted around, specifically the attending students, due to views on the latter event causing pause in the parents of some. Even a couple attendees themselves refused to learn alongside a criminal, which caused some lower-scoring individuals to take the place of top examinees. This was all a couple weeks old. But what caused some students to do a double take wasn't noticing the two students walk through the gate. No, it was the fact that the two students walked up through the gates together, hand in hand, the boy flustered half to death and the girl cheery beyond a reasonable doubt. Himiko's face was warm and giddy, slowly losing the eeriness it had maintained for so long. Izuku's face was a brighter red than a stop sign, but also happy, content, even a little bit proud. This show of affection, however, fell on deaf ears of those too bullheaded to even consider the idea of a villain receiving redemption. The events at the exam were all but forgotten, nobody taking note of what either examinee had been through in their judgments. Midoriya seemed indifferent to their stares. But no matter how well she hid it, Toga still felt exactly as she had when her killer's instinct took over. Ostracized, prying eyes peeling back her resolve like tissue paper, she began to lose herself in anger. But the pseudo-changeling was snapped out of her rising bloodlust by a clenching hand holding hers. Looking over, the blonde bombshell's facade melted away as she saw her freckled fighter give her the most genuine, kind smile she could imagine. Taking a deep breath, she squeezed his hand twice, signaling the vampiric mimic was calming down. They walked through the doors together, Toga being reminded every second of the unbelievable boy beside her. She'd seen him push himself so hard it had made the ex-psychopath's head spin, and his adamant nature forcing himself to stick to the same schedule and exercise routine was mind-boggling. Not to mention his conversation with Nezu just a week before school would get into session. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Nezu, sir. And I understand this is very short notice, so it'll be hard to work out, but I need to insist on this. Toga needs me there to help her, at least for the time being. Midoriya, I do understand your concern, and it is quite the valid one. Wouldn't you say, though, that your current relationship with her could hinder both your and her performance while attending UA? Forgive me, young Midoriya, but you must prove to me you mean." His sentence trailed off as the future attendee looked into the principal's eyes with a stare he'd only seen from the likes of All Might before, a look of pure honesty and determination. "Principal Nezu, I am going to hold both of us to our schoolwork. I want to become a hero and help people, and nothing, not a relationship, not a burglary, not even a death in the family, will keep me from that goal. I want to make sure nobody ever has to struggle alone again. And that starts with Himiko Toga. I don't care if I'm her boyfriend or estranged brother, sir. She'll struggle if I can't be there to keep her on track. Please." The boy's stare kept steady for the extended pause, and after a while, Nezu sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Maybe this is me going soft, but all right, Izuku Midoriya. I will arrange for you and Himiko to both be in Class 1A. However, if your performance falters due to this, know I will be forced to swap her class." As he spoke, the cognizant mammal wrote down a note for himself. The green-haired savior let out a shaky sigh, hanging his head in a proper bow. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down," the freckled fighter affirmed, getting up to leave. Himiko Toga ducked behind the hallway walls and laid down on her bed, biting her pillow and fighting back the burning in her eyes. The vampiric mimic's throat began to choke up as she buried her face deeper into her pillow, straining to keep this flood of emotions inside. She didn't want to let anyone see her cry. As they were about to enter the school, Izuku felt a squeeze on his hand. He very subtly nodded to Himiko and loosened his grip. And with a brief glance at the corner of the building, the freckled fighter noticed the threat his pseudo-changeling did. Before Midoriya could falter in his judgment, Toga was on top of the attacker, lunging at the same time he did and landing atop the assailant hard, knees bashing into the antagonist's spine. Bakugo yelped in pain, and looking at the green-haired crybaby's horrified expression, she let the assailant stand up. "You're lucky you have a damn criminal protecting you or you'd be dead where you stand, Deku." The explosive examinee huffed indignantly, glaring at Izuku with the utmost malice. What nobody, not Himiko, not Katsuki, and certainly not Midoriya himself, expected was the response of the aspiring hero. "You're lucky this damn criminal was here to get you first or you'd be dead where you stand, Kaken." The last word was cast at the Boom King, venom thick and viscous within the name. Truly taken aback, Bakugo fell silent and the blonde bombshell gave her partner a concerned look as the shy teen covered his mouth. "Izuku," she muttered concerned, grabbing his hand tentatively. The pseudo-changeling made eye contact with him, and the young protege took a deep, shaky breath. Before leaving, he gave the violent fighter a determined stare. "After what I've been through, Kaken, I'm not going to tolerate your belittlement. I'm done with your better-than-thou act." He turned around, Toga unsure if she should do anything to ease the teen's tension, not even bothering with eye contact. Izuku muttered one last sentence before heading through the doors. "Brush yourself off and get to Class 1B. We're done here." As the couple walked through the doors, the vampiric mimic vainly attempting to ease the stress of her green-haired crybaby, Bakugo stared on in utter shock. Anger wasn't the right word, nor was fear. Perhaps a proper descriptor could be disheartened. Only then did he notice the pinprick in his arm. Noting it was slightly paler than before, Aizawa introduced himself to his class, then immediately had them go outside for quirk evaluation. The discussions within the student groups were nervous, but no individual was as nervous as Himiko. The words reverberated in her head on repeat, a broken record that couldn't be rewound. "All right, we're going out to the field for some quirk tests. The person with the lowest overall score is gonna get expelled. Let's get this over with. With a lazy smirk and nothing more, the teacher gestured for his class to follow him out the door, and a thick film of dread rested itself upon 1A. The blonde bombshell was especially nervous about this event, due to her quirk being of no use to any physical events. Noting her anxiety, Izuku took her hand gently to comfort her. Able to breathe a bit better knowing at least one person was in her corner, she slapped her cheeks, steadying herself for the proceeding. Looking for any sign of insecurity in the green-haired hero in training, Himiko noticed a shockingly familiar, determined stare. This did comfort the pseudo-changeling to a significant degree, short-lived as that feeling was. The judgmental stares of those suspicious of her past and sneers from those familiar with her quirk left the blonde bombshell socially stressed and mildly irritable. However, Toga had a plan, one that would let her make full use of all for one's hasty awakening of her quirk. Glancing at her vial of blood and sloshing it around subtly, the vampiric mimic had to resist drinking it right away. She was, fortunately, rewarded for her patience when the final event had rolled around. Alright, this is the ball throw. Simple, throw it as far as you can. Let's see the two lovebirds tackle this first. Izuku, go. Aizawa patiently watched Midoriya walk up to the plate and readied himself, stretching out his throwing arm. The racerhead seemed indifferent to the proceedings, fully expecting the young student to successfully launch the ball a considerable distance. After a brief pause, the machine Aizawa held bleeped to life and cheerily reported aloud, 893 meters. The group of spectators murmured amongst themselves in disbelief. Suddenly serious, Aizawa turned to face Toga. Now, your turn. How will you stay in the game here? Show me what you can do with that quirk of yours. Nodding in understanding and tossing an empty vial onto the ground. Himiko stretched just like Izuku had, but in her case, she began to change. A gray, clay-like substance crawled over her body rapidly, turning her feminine features masculine. Eyes flaring to life and sparks flying from her hands in anticipation, the pseudo-Katsuki picked up the ball and clutched it tightly, winding back her throw, ignoring the shock of some and the fear of others, and the mild excitement of Aizawa. The vampiric mimic wound up her throw and launched the ball with a devastating explosion. It rocketed through the air before landing a solid distance away, only confirmed by the teacher's device beeping out, 578 meters. Grinning broadly and the transformation already wearing off, Toga giddily grabbed her clothes from the ground and skipped to the bathroom to get redressed, hurrying before her body was fully clear of the gray goo. Sighing, Aizawa nodded to himself. As much as he'd love to expel another class, he knew that this one had potential. He'd need to ensure they'd have a good future, and thus would drive them harder than he'd driven any class before. Gesturing for everyone to follow him inside, Himiko grinned happily at Izuku and Tackle hugged him, redressed and happy as ever. Before she knew what was happening, a laughing and grinning Midoriya had scooped her up into his arms, heading back to the classroom. She giggled and held the boy close, sighing and getting up to walk on her own after a little while. You know, Izuku, the blonde teen muttered, pensive. Curious, the freckled fighter glanced in her direction. What's up, Himiko? About how I wanted life to just be easy, you know. Well, now I kinda get why that was a yucky view to go by. Hard work is kinda gratifying. Pleasantly surprised, the green-haired student gave her another award-winning smile. And a bear hug. You know, we could add some training time into your schedule. It'd let us get more time together while also improving for school. We can even give one another more lessons on combat and trade knowledge of heroes. As he spoke, Izuku's face lit up like a Christmas tree, making the blonde bombshell's heart flutter. She nodded in acceptance, and they exchanged a fist bump. Himiko could learn to love this. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, all you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day. Hey, what is up, mortals? What If Villains Had an Academia Season 2 Part 1. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat, and so we begin. Uraraka toppled to the ground, clutching the puncture in her shoulder. Before her stood her tormentor, a Namu constructed from the Shy Hasekai's finest fighter. The limbs sprouting from its back were akin to the legs of a spider, and his face was fully obscured by a battered crow's mask. The 4 arms it sported were strengthened by the life force being drained from the gravitational girl before it picked up off the ground like a mere plaything, struggling intensely to master her new abilities as her body was being savagely shredded by this Namu's quirk. Achako shrieked at the top of her lungs, and in a flash, her wound closed and the Namu before her was reverted to a dog pile of the individuals it was forged from. For a moment, the levitating lady could swear the primary Namu gave her a pain cry for help before being abruptly skewered by All For One's quirk-activating tendrils. Again, muttered the quirk amalgam, sneering and causing the young Namu before him to screech in pain, desperately struggling to hold herself together as her opponent's quirk reactivated, attempting yet again to split her apart at an atomic level. With one last cry, a primal roar of defiance, Achako's body erupted with a flash of magenta-tinged light. She felt her body finally lock into its new abilities, her quirks sliding into place, puzzle pieces finally finding the proper positioning to fit into a grander image. When finally able to stand again, the naive Namu took a deep breath, her once navy blue skin now returning to her formal skin tone. Her horn had shifted to the exact middle of her forehead, almost causing an artificial widow's peak. Her hair grew longer, becoming a bright silver color which worked in tandem with her now golden irises. Looking down at her hands, Uraraka now felt some form of raw power jolt her system back to life before looking back up at her sensei. All For One was beaming ear to ear, grin sinister and hand filled with a small bundle of cash. Perfect. The forced awakening of quirks is something I finally understand. And it was all thanks to you, Achako Uraraka. The rest of the promised money will be coming as long as you stick with us here, but for now, this should suffice. Do with it what you will. An equal amount was sent to your family. With a wild smile filled with malice, All For One stared down at the artificially awoken teen and put his arms behind his back, grabbing the Namu which had collapsed due to the orders of its creator. The criminal conglomeration siphoned the might of the beast into himself, and in a moment which made Uraraka want to vomit, the eyes and nose of the beast erupted off of its face. The quirk amalgam laughed maniacally, his face accumulating the blood, which traveled in 9 mystical streams to fit his face perfectly. The eyes rolled around unnaturally as their tendons reattached themselves within his head, and the nose cracked sickeningly. While this all went down within a matter of seconds, All For One knelt down until he was at face level with Uraraka, still holding onto the Namu's face. With a single clench of his fist, the face of the still-breathing behemoth evaporated, reconstructing itself atop All For One's face. The face of what the leader of the Hesekai was now belonged to All For One, combining the cell activation and overhaul quirks to give himself a pseudo-permanent facelift. His body slowly grew to match the leader's own, until he was a near-perfect copy of Chisaki. The laughing of the madman was enough to drive Achako up the wall. This is simply flawless. Thanks to that child's forfeit life, I can perfect my craft. And you, my dear Achako, you are an invaluable asset. Thus, I shall treat you as such. All For One gave Achako a bow before stepping through a portal, still laughing, thanking her lucky stars. The gravitational girl let go of the breath she'd held before getting sick on the ground. Why? The young girl couldn't stop asking herself this. After all she'd seen, all she'd been through, why did she go to a place she could never escape? Frustrated, she punched the ground, causing a crack in the asphalt. Tears poured down her face as she wiped her mouth. All at once, she remembered the pain she had felt rush back to her all at once as a large pair of hands wrapped around her throat. She felt her skin begin to crumble like ashes from a campfire, and she writhed in a furious attempt to keep herself together. Without giving her any leeway, Tamura tightened his grip, which caused the naive Namu to begin writhing harder, the spread of disintegration getting harder and harder to fight. You make me sick. Why do you have to come in here and steal Master away from me? You and your damned quirks. He cares for you as though he never kept me. I'll make sure you're nothing more than dust in the woods before you get the chance to overtake me. With that, Shigaraki turned around in an attempt to carry Uraraka somewhere more discreet for what followed, but he was stopped by a hand to his forehead, bursting from a gray portal of sludge. All at once, Tamura dropped the girl, who sputtered and coughed uncontrollably as he felt his abilities leave his body. With one swift motion, All For One tossed his ex-protégé aside as he laid a hand on the levitating lass's back and healed her fully. without even fully re-entering the area, all for one side. Take Tamura somewhere far away from here. He's useless to me now. I've got all the strength and leverage I could possibly need. The portal then briskly closed behind him, and with tears in her eyes, Ochako reluctantly dragged the unconscious, quirkless man to a dark alley in the worst part of the alleys surrounding her home. Looking back, wishing she could do something to ease the pain this poor fellow would inevitably feel after he would awake, the naive Namu turned and skulked back to the villain's school, leaving the man Wo attempted to murder her atop a pile of garbage bags. When Tamura woke, he sat upright with a jolt of alertness, suddenly struck with vertigo and feeling the pain from a massive migraine. The handsy man looked at his hands, which were now covered in garbage and sewage from the place he was left in. In a vain attempt to reject what had just happened, Shigaraki tried to pick up a banana peel and break it down, but nothing happened. Frustrated, he tried again, but to no avail. He squeezed harder and harder until it simply slopped out of his hand, too weak to hold itself together any longer. A tear forming in his eyes, the disintegrating devil kept trying to use his abilities, but every time he was met with further failure. After the 7th attempt on a spoiled loaf of bread, a few drops of rain landed atop his ragged hair. Tamura scratched his face nervously, suddenly pausing and feeling his raw skin sting with the cool hydration brought about by the storm clouds overhead. His hands shook, and the handsy man bit his lower lip to keep from breaking into tears. He was being reminded of his childhood, of his time on the streets all over again, slamming a fist onto the pavement over and over until he couldn't bear the pain. Shigaraki screamed aloud, cries resounding unheard throughout the alleyways he'd never traversed before. His despair was palpable, yet nobody remained outside to feel it with him. In this moment, something broke within the villain. His motivation dropped, and his instincts to live were nullified. His mind went blank, and his eyes went dead as he slumped against the alleyways, open-palmed and miserable. Looking up lifelessly at the droplets which peppered the buildings around him, Tamura Shigaraki wondered why he'd ever trusted All for One to begin with. After being blatantly humiliated at the hands of some ex-convict, Bakugo was growling under his breath. How dare she make a scene like that in the damned courtyard of all places? And Deku, what had occurred to make him so much more confident than before? As mad as he was, Katsuki was also pensive. Maybe he had been a bit hasty when judging the pair of them. Whatever anyone else said, that girl was more tame than the clips he'd seen of her leaked online. Maybe she was able to move past her past, after all. Shaking his head, the Boom King scratched the back of his head agitatedly, before shouting out loud, "Damn it, DEKU. Why are you and that crazy chick so damn confusing?" This eruption of vocality led to a response from somewhere nearby, and after immediately catching on, Bakugo leapt back in a defensive stance, staring down an alley at the source. In the setting sun and the downpour surrounding him, he could barely make out a humanoid figure, covered in garbage and drenched to the bone. Eyeing him, Katsuki tentatively stepped closer, cautiously. After getting a good look at him, the explosive teen soon recognized the vacant stare. Heck, if he didn't know any better, he'd assume this mystery man was dead. However, every dozen seconds or so, he heard this husk of a human being shakily wheeze. Unsure of what to do, pride clashing with human decency, the short-tempered student scratched the back of his neck. "You gonna get out of this rain or something?" he muttered, looking sidelong at the depressed man laying before him. His head barely moved to face him, chapped lips unmoving but eyes lazily noting the existence of the kid before him. Grumbling, Bakugo continued, "You got a home or something? You should go there." Katsuki took pause as this newcomer slowly shifted back to his original position, vacant stare looking at a poster before him. Bakugo matched his gaze and saw the wanted poster describing just who the villain before him was. His heartbeat increased, hands sparking violently for a moment, but he took pause. Comparing the two images, something was clearly wrong with the scene before him. Deciding to make a bold move, the Boom King spoke up. "Hey, if you don't move, I'm gonna drag you to the cops. They'll put you away, you hear me?" Without another word, Tamura put his hands up before him, limp and inactive, sighing. Katsuki became enraged at this. "You mean to tell me that you, who's wanted for that much damn money, is willing to just give up? Damn it, I'll kick your ass if you don't tell me what you're doing here. Take some initiative, you damned freak." After a moment, Shigaraki put his hands back down to his sides, heaving a sigh. Shaking his head and rubbing his face with his hands, he looked up to make eye contact with the explosive teen. "Take me to jail. Kill me. Leave me here. I have no more reason to live. I don't even have any power anymore." As if to prove a point, Tamura lifted the loaf of bread and clenched his fist around it as tight as he could, only squishing the contents of the plastic wrap. "If I had power, this would be a pile of ashes by now. It isn't. I have nothing left. Just do whatever." The handsy man returned to his previous position, staring at the poster, now clearly sporting mildly watery eyes. Bakugo was at a loss, shock freezing him in place, weighing his options, seemingly being his best bet at the moment. The Boom King mulled over his choices. If he left this criminal here, he could easily be lying and take innocent lives. If he wasn't lying and he left this criminal here, then he'd still be lying to the authorities. However, if he tried to take him in while he still had his quirk and was just hiding it, he could die or be used as a bargaining chip. The last option, though, rang true within the crackling fighter's gut. Taking him to the police while he has no quirk would not only let him claim a large bounty and bragging rights, but would get this mopey villain off the streets. Fine. If you don't care, you won't fight back. And if you do fight back, I'll beat the crap out of you. Bakugo hefted Tamura to his feet, guiding him to the police station. After a brisk walk and on stairs, they finally arrived and the explosive teen handed over the convict. After out of earshot and a moment of hesitation, Katsuki acted on impulse and pulled the police chief aside. Can I come in now and then to make sure he's still here? After glancing at Tamura and seeing his condition, the chief held back a smile and nodded briskly. Tamura sighed, shivering violently in his cell. He knew they'd test him to see if he had a quirk. He didn't care anymore. At least the rain was gone, so he could start recovering from his migraine. Looking at the kid who brought him in here, he felt a brief memory come back to him, a memory of his mother, of an honest person. As brutal as that kid had been in his approach, he still did try to help. Shigaraki sighed. Maybe he'd observe heroes and villains alike from his cell for now and see how things went. After all, he'd have a show to watch soon. Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interest. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching and have a great day.